Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Salty Pastor Podcast. This is an ecosystem that I've developed over the last decade or so, designed to help you grow deep in your faith by learning to think for yourself. The goal of the Salty Pastor has never been to tell people what to believe, but to clarify what they believe with conviction. And because of that, it always leads to a foundation, a rock solid, unchanging, eternal foundation of truth. And that turns out to be Jesus Christ. He is the revelation of God Himself to us. And He has shown Himself in who He is and the capacity that only He had to redeem us from our sins. Now, over the last probably 8 weeks, I've been on hiatus. And so I just wanted to give you a little update and spend a little bit of personal time about where I'm at and where I'm going. Now, my hope in sharing this with you is twofold. First, just give you an understanding of what's been going on in my life and how I'm dealing with it, but also to help you grow in your faith. And I've always believed that, if leaders and people of influence and people with history and spiritual gifts designed to help people grow in their faith are open and transparent about what's going on in their own lives, it helps other people realize that, number one, they're doing better than they think they are just simply because they're thinking about growing and maturing, but also to help people have a sense of camaraderie and that the things that they're thinking and the feeling and the challenges that they face are not unique to them. They're not alone. All of us go through them. And it's our capacity to share and be transparent and be open about what's happening in our lives that we're able to encourage one another as we see the day approaching. So that's kind of what I hope to do. I don't want it to be overly, I want it to be hopeful and not sad, is what I'm trying to say. Now, one of the things that is important to understand is that my wife, Kim, had been diagnosed with a really rare form of MS. And to this day, I'm still not convinced that they actually knew what was going on, and she felt the same way. And the reason why is because it's like when there's something going on with your immune system and it's just so out of the box and they can't treat it, they look for markers and they do a spinal tap or a lumbar puncture, they call it. And what it does is they look for certain markers in the fluid that kind of allow them to put it in a certain category. Well, she had all the markers for the category of MS. But you have to understand the MS category has become kind of broad and they kind of throw everything in there that they don't really understand. And I think that was what was happening in her case. The MS in and of itself was not that difficult to deal with. It hindered her capacity to walk. She had drop foot. She lost her balance. She lost almost all of her movement in her right arm, and she was right-handed. But the real issue for her was something was eating away at her nerves, and it just got progressively worse, and it created an inordinate amount of suffering in her life. I mean, excruciating pain. And it's been going on for years. And so we've been seeking, multiple protocols and, things to try to help address the situation. We went to the Mayo Clinic twice. We went to the Salt Lake City Rocky Mountain Multiple Sclerosis Institute, which is highly, highly reputable. We saw probably 5 or 6 different neurologists here in the Treasure Valley. I think one of the things that was difficult is that they said, you definitely have a problem, you definitely have an issue, but nobody ever really could explain what was going on to a level that she felt they understood until we went to the Rocky Mountain Multiple Sclerosis Institute in Salt Lake City. The doctor there, he's a leader in this field, and he spends half his time doing research and presenting what he's discovering. So he's a real leader. And in addition to that, we also went out of the country. We went to the leading MS specialist in Europe at Queen's College. He's head of the department there, very well respected. And we met with him 2 or 3 times over Zoom, and he reviewed all of our medical records. And the reason why we were able to do that is because my cousin, who's a good friend of ours, and we've been close for quite some time, is personal friends with some of the people in that department. And so they made a special request, and so he agreed to review Kim's case. What happened is they were able to slow down the progression of the MS, which is a loss of dexterity and movement and things of that nature. But they couldn't do anything to treat what was eating away at her nerves and causing all this massive pain. And so we tried everything. I mean, you name it, we did it. And she went on extremely restrictive diets. She looked at every alternative treatment out there: functional medicine, Eastern medicine, Western medicine. I mean, stem cell, everything. We tried it all, and nothing could stop the progression. So about a year ago, well, it's a little longer than that, in May of 2025 or 2024, excuse me, we went to the Mayo for the second time, and we had all this new information from the Rocky Mountain MS Clinic and from all these other places that we brought. Their team reviewed it, and they came back and they just said, basically we're at wit's end, and we just don't know how to treat you or what to do. We just encourage you to try to figure out a way to mitigate the pain. And so I came back from that, and things have been getting progressively worse since the fall of 2023. And so in 2024, in January, I was a pastor for about 38, 39 years. And for almost 30 of those years, 29 years, I was at Foothills Christian Church in Boise, Idaho. And so I went to the leadership there in January of 2024 and said, look, we need to put a succession plan together, and I need to start working this because, I'm my wife's caretaker, and I'm here working, but I'm not giving my best. I mean, I fully admitted that. I said, but, as long as you think my preaching is sharp and it's helping grow the church, and it was, the church was fairly large, 1,600 regular attendance between all of our online campuses and on-campus campus. And so we just said, look, I need to kind of transition out because we don't know how much time she has, and I want to maximize that. And so we started to kind of put things on paper, talk about different things. I was working with the chairman of the elders at that time to get that done, and we were getting some movement on that. And then I came back from the meeting with the Mayo at the end of May, and I just, it was kind of bad news, and I just said, hey, we need to kind of figure this out. And so one of the issues about it was that in the succession plan, it specifically states, and this is just based on industry research, and I mean, people have been studying succession stuff for 50 years now in evangelical Christian churches or Protestant churches. And, they say, here's good practices, best practices, this is what works, doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. And one of the things in the succession plan that is specifically stated is that, well, once the senior pastor turns over, you find somebody, is that the executive pastor has to leave too, right? Otherwise it creates a power block within the church, and there's conflict and stuff like that. And so the current executive pastor kind of knew that, and he and one of the other elders, he was close to one of the elders, said, I don't think he liked that. And so what he did is he launched a false attack against me, and he just blew up the church. And I was already on leave to take care of my wife because prior to that, back in February of that year, I said, look, I'm going to take 10 weeks off, maybe 12 weeks off this summer to just take care of my wife and kind of give the church a little bit of a taste of me not being around so that they might be ready to transition. And so I was already off. And there was some questions coming back about how come I didn't come back sooner and so forth. And that was just simply because I my wife was in really bad shape. And I to this day think that the executive pastor and the people that followed him and this elder, they didn't believe it. They didn't believe that my wife was as ill as she was. And that's a really sad indictment on those people and what they're like. Um, and how selfish and narcissistic they really are. That they could just care less about what I was having to deal with. They didn't care. They just wanted what they wanted, and that was kind of a little control or something. I don't know to this day. I can't really speak into that because I just don't know. But then I tried to. The elders came back, and to me, after all the thing blew up, and they tried to ask me to come back and try to save it, and I said, I don't want to do that. I'm not coming back. But Kim said, I want you to do that. And for her, I would do it. So I did it. And that lasted about maybe 2.5, 3 months. And I just kind of righted the ship. And I found a guy that could come in who's there now. His name's Trent. Phenomenal guy. And he's doing just a phenomenal job. He was God's man for what the church needed at that time. And then I just said, I have to do this full time. And so I've been caring for my wife full time, And it really dominates your life when you're a caretaker and someone is fairly incapacitated. And so I just became her caretaker, and it just kind of progressively got worse. And then in January, they were struggling to treat her pain. And so we went to all these pain doctors, people that manage pain. And they said, well, you should go to this place. It's called Keystone, which I give triple thumbs up to Keystone. And what an incredible medical organization. They are phenomenal people. They did a phenomenal job. But what happened is we went into palliative care. And their goal there is to just try to get her pain under control so she could function, right? Because she couldn't function. In a lot of ways, she couldn't move, and I'd have to carry her to the toilet or the bathroom. I'd have to do all these things. I just couldn't, I could do that some because I'm in pretty good shape and I lift weights. And the reason why I've been lifting weights is because I knew this time was going to come. And so I could do that. But in addition to that, she had lost probably 60 pounds. So she'd lost a lot of weight. So she was like 110 pounds. And so we went on palliative care, and they got their entire team. They had what do they call that? A licensed something nurse, like a PA. They had pain doctors. They had all of these medical professionals, neurologists, and everything consulting on her case to try to get what was going on under control. And there were some good things that happened, right? And helped her do a little bit better. But they would up her meds or change her meds, and she'd do fine for about 10 days, and then her body would like adjust to it. And then these waves of pain and nerve things, she called them nerve storms, would come in and just rock her world. And so then they would try to adjust. So we went through that for probably, I came at 5 months, 6 months. And then they got to this point in May, and Kim said, well, I have two goals. Number one is I'd love to go on an Alaska cruise because you could, push me around in a wheelchair, and we get a handicap room, and it allows me to, you could, even though I'm in bed most of the days, I could sit there. You could set me up on the little veranda, So I bought a suite, so it had the nice balcony, bigger balcony, and more space because she's going to spend the majority of her time on this cruise in the room, and I could set her up, and just let her. An Alaska cruise gives you a lot to look at, right? Because you're seeing all the wildlife, and you can see the landscape as you kind of go up the inland passage there. And so what happens is she did that. And the second thing is that Mackenzie was pregnant with our first grandbaby, and she said, I want to be here for the birth of my baby. And so they were talking about my first grandchild, not her baby. I misspoke. Sorry about that. So what happened is she and the doctors at Keystone and her care manager sat down, and his name is Nick, and he was a phenomenal guy, just a great job. And the beautiful thing about palliative care is they would come to the house and they would bring all the tests came to the house, which is really good because it got really difficult to move her. And that is the reason why it was so difficult to move her and move her around isn't because I physically wasn't able to do it or she couldn't be in a wheelchair, right? And I could get her up into the truck and enter into the wheelchair. That wasn't the point. The point is that whenever you touched her or you moved her, she had these horrendous waves of pain come over that she couldn't even manage. And so the fact that they came to the house was a wonderful thing because I didn't have to move her and take her to doctor's appointments anymore, which were really, really hard on her. So what ended up happening is they came to the conclusion that maybe you ought to go on hospice. We just feel that this is so debilitating, and it's so difficult on you that at least if you go on hospice, we can focus purely on care. We have no parameters of long-term health effects. And she went through this a lot. I mean, we had hours and hours of prayer and discussion on what does it mean to face the end of your life and how do you want to live your final days, right? So we talked about that a lot. And she talked about and came to the conclusion, she said, look, this pain and this suffering is so debilitating. I can't talk. I can't even talk to you. I can't even answer a question. I can't eat. I mean, I can't do anything because it's just so, incapacitating. But if they could just get it down to like a 5, still tons of pain, but at least I could have a conversation with somebody and I could talk to you and I could talk to the kids. And so they decided to go on hospice so they could achieve that goal. And so on June 18th, she asked them to come over. They brought the paperwork and she signed it all herself. And the next day I got the book, Heaven. And it's just a great book. It just talks about heaven. And so I started reading her this book about heaven. And it's just a real powerful book. And so I would sit, every evening, I'd make her dinner and then I'd sit there. And the evening time around dinner was the only about 2 hours a day where she was lucid and feeling well enough to think out, And so then I would read to her. Well, she went on hospice, and for the first couple of weeks, she was doing so much better, and people would see her and they go, "Oh, it's like the old Kim's back. It's awesome. It's awesome." But what those people didn't know is that they had quadrupled her pain meds. I mean, it was just a huge amount. And the hospice nurse was coming over, once a week and then eventually twice a week. And she would be with Kim a lot. And she noticed that Kim was not responding or her body was adjusting super fast to the pain meds that they were giving her and that she would get incapacitated really quickly. And so they said, look, we want to make you comfortable. And so about 2 weeks in, maybe 10 days into hospice, the hospice nurse pulled me aside and she said, Doug, I just want you to be aware of something that I've seen. I've been doing this. I don't know, she's been 30 years a hospice nurse, so she's done it a long time. And she just said, when people have really severe chronic pain at the level your wife does, the body is in this fight mode for a long time. And so we're going to try to get her comfortable and to relax. Your wife's body hasn't relaxed in 4 or 5 years. And so we're going to do that. She goes, the problem is when you do that, oftentimes they'll pass away. And I go, well, why would that happen? And they just said, well, because the body's been in fight mode for so long And what ends up happening is it finally gets at that place of peace, and then it can let go. And that's what happened to Kim, I think. I think it's what happened to her, because 1 month later, on July 18th, she passed away and went home to be with the Lord. And, it's weird because she's gone, and it's hard to think in a way that she's just not a part of my thinking anymore. I don't mean memories. Okay, the way our relationship worked is we would always talk and make decisions together. She was super smart. If you knew Kim, she was wicked smart. And all my kids, all three of them, wicked smart kids. Zach is just brilliant in math, and Mackenzie's just brilliant, and Jake is just brilliant. They're all super, super smart. They all get that from their mom. If they're ornery or cantankerous, stubborn, they get that from their dad. And so, but what happened is she passed away, and on that day, just when she was getting close, because the last 2 weeks were really 24/7. I didn't sleep. I wasn't, it's the last 4 or 5 days, I had to hire a night nurse to come in at 10 in the evening till about 4 a.m. or 5 a.m., something like that, because my body was just kind of breaking it, because I hadn't slept in 2 weeks. And so you can't push yourself too far. And so they came in and helped. And then all of her family was around there, and coming in and doing shifts. And her mom, of course. Glenda is just, if you think of Gabriel the angel, Glenda's right there next to him, because she's just a phenomenal, phenomenal servant of the Lord. But prior to that, during these times when she couldn't talk or anything, I would just sit and read the Bible. And I was reading in the book of Job, and it just says that, Job was very, very wealthy. He had everything. And it says that basically he lost his family. His kids were lost. He loses all of his business. It's all wiped out. And once he'd lost his family and he'd lost his, means of production, or his job, or his assets, or whatever, it says that he arose and he tore his robe and he shaved his head. He fell to the ground and he worshiped. And he said, "Naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I shall return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." And through all of this, Job did not sin, nor did he blame God. And so the Hebrew phrase for blame God, because we think of blame as it's ascribing fault to something, but in the Hebrew, it basically means ascribing an unseemliness towards God. In other words, he refused to say, not only it's not God's fault, but he also said it's not insensitive of God that he didn't intervene. And I think that's something that happens a lot today in society. This is a side note, is that people are like, well, God could have healed me if he wanted to. And we say that because we're trying to ascribe an unseemliness to God. Like, well, he doesn't love me because he won't do what I want. And then that seems to be real prevalent. And that just, so what I did is, on that day, is I tore the shirt that I was wearing, and then I shaved my head just like he did. And the reason I did that is because I feel that everything that's gone on in my life in the last 5 years has been like a Greek tragedy, right? It's just a Greek tragedy. You name it, it could go wrong, it's gone wrong. And, lifelong friends betray me with lies and deceit. People that I employed and gave an opportunity to create false accusations, which, by the way, will be proven to be false in a court of law. So that is moving forward. And everybody that says, yeah, this is, what they said about you and the evidence is there, is the most insane thing. So anybody who was a part of that, and if you believe that, then shame on you. Shame on you, because the truth always comes out, and it's coming out. That's for a future thing. So, because all I got now left in my life is justice and restitution. That's it. Justice and restitution. And Micah 6:8 says it the best. What does the Lord require of you? But to do justice. Walk humbly with your God. I'm not trying to get revenge on anybody. I'm just trying to get the truth out and bring these people who did these things to try to destroy a church, destroy me for their own personal whim. I feel like they're like the mean girl clique in high school who just decides they want to destroy somebody just for the fun of it. And so that will play out, and it will come to terms, and you can get an update on that. But I'm not here to rationalize or justify what's going on there. I'm just simply telling you what's going on in my life. And what's going on in my life right now is that I shaved my head, because no matter how bad things got, Job's point is really simple. He says, naked I came into this world, and naked I should return. I shouldn't expect anything good. I don't have a right to expect, especially from God. He goes, God is God, and I'm not. I wished that God would heal my wife. I pled with the Lord to heal my wife. I begged him to heal my wife. I fasted days and weeks so he would heal my wife. He didn't do it. That's his right, and there is no unseemliness that you can ascribe to God for that. There are things I don't know and I don't understand, things that I don't grasp, that I will never grasp. My infinitesimally small mind is incapable of understanding God, let alone all the variables in my own life. That doesn't make what I'm going through less painful, less difficult. But the one thing I won't do is blame God or be mad at God. Because the fact that Kim suffered and died has nothing to do with the loving holiness of God. It has everything to do with Satan and the evil that he has polluted this world with. Sickness and disease is evil because of sin, and that's why it exists. That's not God's fault. That's Satan's fault. And the only reason it still exists is because human beings created in the image of God have free will. So evil exists in the essence of free will choice of human beings. And so, the first thing I wanted to do is just kind of give you a rundown of the fact that's why I've been gone. 2 weeks before she passed away, she became very incapacitated, and it was literally 24/7, and I just couldn't podcast or do anything other than just focus on her. And I'm so glad I did. And then after she passed away, I needed about 4 or 5 weeks before I could come back and just talk to you guys and tell you where I'm at. One of the things, though, that I would like to share with you is that Kim and I had a wonderful marriage, and we had a wonderful life. Right before she became incoherent, I was reading to her the book on heaven. We were kind of discussing it, and she stopped for a moment. She said, Doug, I just want you to know that this time in my life, even though I have all this pain and suffering, in my spirit, I've never felt more loved. I've just never felt more loved and secure in that love. And she goes, and a lot of that's because of you. You've been the most important thing other than Jesus in my life. And, I'm going to remember that and carry that with me for a very, very long time. Because that's the greatest thing we can do for other people, is look past our own pain and our own suffering and our own difficulties and our own struggles and try to make or help someone that we care about feel loved and valued, that they matter. You know, I by no stretch of the imagination was a perfect husband in any way, shape, or form. But I'm really filled with joy that throughout all of this, number one, I ascribe nothing unseemly to God. And number two, Kim felt that she was loved completely. What what more could we ask from life than those things? I hope that my story and what I'm going through can help you in your journey. It can encourage you. And when you feel tempted to ascribe unseemliness to God because things are going so bad, maybe you might think, well, God, why do you hate me? Or God, why did you don't do that? That's a trick, a mental trick that Satan uses when things go bad. Just remember it's the devil's fault. I mean, anytime any evil or bad things happens, it's Satan's fault. He's the father of lies. He is the author of evil and rebellion against God. None of this crap would have happened if he hadn't shown up in the garden, right? And then Eve and Adam then done what they were explicitly known not to do. But because they brought evil and sin into the world, I think it's so important to understand that when something goes bad, just say, man, I hate the devil. You know, I just want to rip his head off and spit down his neck or whatever. It's his fault, you know? So let's keep blame where it belongs and let's keep love where it belongs. So I hope this wasn't a sad podcast. That's my hope. But I hope it was something that could encourage you in your journey of faith. Now, on Thursday, I'm going to talk a little bit more, give you a little bit more update, and then kind of share about where I see and hope that the Salty Pastor is going. Thanks for listening today and being here with me today. And there's going to be a lot of, hopefully this fall, new developments and some new things that we're going to do. I want to say thank you to all the people who donate and support the Salty Pastor. Your support, even while I was doing a rerun series during this time, has just meant a lot to me. And I want to say thank you because it just has helped me realize that God is not done with me yet. He might want to use me to continue to help coach people up in their faith because that's my goal. So God bless you. And this is the Salty Pastor signing off for today. And remember, what you believe is one of the most important things about you.